My name's John Stewart. I'm Associate Dean for Cultural and Community Engagement at FIU's College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. And I'm also a director of the Miami Beach Urban Studios on Miami Beach, Lincoln Road and Washington Avenue. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here tonight to another installment in our series, Zen and the Art of Writing in America. This is Monday nights are now very special because I get to see and work with a very dear colleague, Deborah Briggs from the Betsy Hotel. The Betsy is in real life is a close neighbor of ours, both physically and in spirit. And this series is helping us all find a center and our kind of mindful way of approaching this wild and woolly world that we seem to be living in. So with that, Deborah, would you like to welcome everybody?
I really would. Welcome everyone to our very special event tonight, which features Celia, Pérez. I'm delighted to see everyone again virtually. I wanted to take a moment before we proceed just to thank some of our community partners. In addition to FIU MBUS, Miami Beach Urban Studios, which John so ably leads, I wanted to always do a shout out to the city of Miami Beach. We have such a wonderful arts and culture program there and such an incredible support mechanism there. In addition, in partnership with Miami-Dade County, for this series, we've initiated a closed captions program. In our first series last month, we received a grant actually to test run closed captions, and we found that many people enjoy doing that, and John will explain to you how to access that so you're sure that you see everything that's said. And then I think you can also download it later. Other partners are the Arts and Business Council of Miami. They've really helped us to build a robust audience for this program, which numbers actually 1,000 households now. So we're really excited about just being able to convene everyone in a challenging time. And I think you guys will all agree those times are not abating yet. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Pablo Cartaya. Pablo has been working with the Betsy Hotel for, well, he's a young man, so he won't want me to say probably like 6 or 8 years now. But I met him as a young boy when he was just starting out in his career. He's actually finishing graduate school when we met him, working on his first book. And he helped us to shape a lot of programs that we're proud of at the Betsy, including our Writers Room program. And among those programs was a program called Writers for Young Readers, because we were really committed to creating an environment where all writers felt welcome. And we just, by meeting Pablo, it was confirmed to us that writers who choose to write for young people are doing probably the most important kind of writing of all, because they're shaping tomorrow's readers. And so with us, Pablo shaped a program like that for us. And even though he's gone off to great things as a writer in his own right, and he'll talk about that, he's continued that project with us. And so during these difficult times, we're continuing those programs online. And then when we're back together in a few months, we hope to see you all at the Betsy and at FIU MBUS for actual live convenings of Writers for Young Readers. So without further ado, I pass it to Pablo, and here we go. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Deb. You know, it's funny because my books, and I don't really want to speak too much about my books, but if you want to learn more about who I am and what I do, you can go to my website, pablocartaya.com. But my books center around 3 main tenets, and it's family, community, and culture. And all of my books center around that. And when I think of the Betsy and I think of Deb, I think of family, I think of my community, I think of culture. And the Betsy and FIU has really embodied that. And probably, Deb, I mean, I probably have to give you some credit for that too, you know, that the idea that we come together in good times and in bad times to share and to really think about the things that are important and to celebrate art and to celebrate people, I think is something that is a treasure. And I love you for it. And I love FIU. And I just want to thank you all. And I'm very excited, as I was last week, to share another very dear friend and fellow author, Celia C. Pérez. I'm gonna read her her bio that, you know, because I want to make sure that everybody knows who exactly she is. But then I'm gonna talk about like how I admire her and the great things that she is, and then we're gonna have a conversation. So Celia C. Pérez, her debut novel, The First Rule of Punk, was a 2018 American Library Association Pura Belpre honor, a 2018 Boston Globe Horn Book honor, the winner of the 2018 Tomas Rivera Mexican American Children's Book Award, and was named for several Best of the Year lists, including NPR's Best Books of 2017, the Chicago Public Library's Best of the Best Books, and the New York Public Library's Best Books for Kids. Her second book, which is equally outstanding, is called Strange Birds. It's a book for young readers, middle grade readers to be specific. It is also an Association of Library Sciences to Children Notable Book Award, and was named to several Best of the Year lists, including Rise, a Feminist Book Project list, the Center for the Study of Multicultural Children's Literature. It was a Best Book of 2019, and the Washington Post Best Children's Book of 2019. She is a graduate of the University of Florida and the University of South Florida. She lives in Chicago with her family, where she works as a community college librarian. And she's originally from Miami, Florida. Now, Celia, I'll forgive you for being a gator.
I'm sure maybe somebody.
No, I'm kidding. But you know, this is a really special moment because we haven't really had an opportunity to kind of just publicly talk about, you know, the special connection that we've had and why we've become good friends, right? For those of you who don't know, Celia and I share an editor, and our debut books came out in the same year. And not only that, I mentioned earlier that her debut book, The First Rule of Punk, was a 2018 Pura Belpre Award honor. Well, I was also a 2018 Pura Belpre Award honor. So we published in the same year, we had the same editor, and we both we were both honored with these incredible awards at the same year. So we were like really coming up together. And it's just an awesome thing to be with somebody whose work you really love, and then you end up liking that person, you know, and like, wow, this is a super awesome. And the thing is too, is like, we're very different, you know, we're like, I'm very like super like, let's go. And Celia's like, you need to stop, you're being a dork. So it's kind of, it's really a fun thing. We call each other book siblings because, you know, we have the same editor, we are published with the same imprint. And I'm just really excited to talk to you about books, to talk to you about writing, and to talk to you about, you know, libraries, and to talk to you about, you know, what's going on in this world right now, and how we can find some zen, find some, you know, some ways to kind of, you know, breathe a little bit and find a way forward in all this madness, you know. So Celia, I'm glad you're here. Let's chat.
Yeah, and this is nice because despite our shared journey, I think this might be the first time we do something together that's, you know, related to our work. So
yeah,
it's nice to
because we've been on panels and stuff, but it's like now we're just like actually talking. Yeah.
Together. Huh.
Have we? No, actually, we haven't. No, we were. You know what? We did that. That's right. We did that thing for the yard.
Oh yes,
at ALA.
Yeah,
but that wasn't a panel.
Yeah.
And you yelled at me because yes, because a librarian asked the question, and we were in this like super cool. It was a podcast, and this librarian asks, okay, I'm going to ask across the line. These are all the Pura Belpre winners. And then she asked, we're going to ask across the line, do you dog ear or do you put a bookmark on your books? And everybody said dog ear. Everybody said bookmark, and I said dog ear. And Celia, in front of like 400 people, goes, "What is wrong with you?"
But it's just because I was messing with you.
Yeah, I know,
I'm
but
glad.
it's true. I say that story a lot because it really kind of like, oh, I guess as a librarian, that's a no.
I mean, I wouldn't dog ear. That's just my personal like preference, but I'm all for whatever you need to do is cool.
But it's true. Yeah, it's nice that we're chatting and we're talking. You know, there's so much that we can talk about, and we do a lot. We do kind of like touch base with each other,
Yeah.
you know, often. And I think that I wanted to start with that, the conversation. It's like, you know, this world as a writer, it's kind of lonely sometimes, you know, and depending on where you are in your career, like there's certain, you know, there's certain people that you hope that you can find, that you can connect with and say, oh, okay, they will get where you're going, where you're at, you know. And I'm curious to see, like, I want to see how you feel about that, like having somebody that has kind of come up with you, you know. I want you to compliment me first, and then I'm going to compliment you. No, I want to talk about, honestly, I want to talk about the relationships that writers have with each other, the friendships that they establish with each other as they're coming up. And that's something that's not talked about a lot because it's such a solitary profession. But there's moments, and I think one of the special things that I love about my relationship, my friendship with you, is that when I'm feeling kind of down, you know, like I know I can hit you up, I know I can text you, and I'm saying like, I can't get the pages in today, it sucks, and I'm like worried and stuff, and you respond right away and you get it, like you understand, you know. And I think I want to like chat about that because
How
yeah.
to snap out of it.
Well, that's true, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, what do you think about that?
I mean, so you know this about me. I'm an introvert, and I think a lot of writers are introverts, and that's probably part of what attracts us to what we do, is that it is very solitary. And for me, being an introvert, I don't I don't connect. I feel like I have a harder time connecting with people. Like I'm very selective about who I pull into, you know, my planet. And when I met you, you reminded me of home. You know, you were like the kind of person that I grew up with. You were from Miami. You knew a lot of like the references and just like the history that I have, and I think culturally you understood a lot of where I was coming from, and what it's like to be to be Latino, to be Cuban American, to be from Miami, to have these very specific identities, and then be in this world of writing. And so I feel like I think that in part is why I feel very open with you, especially. I have relationships with other writers as well, who I feel that kind of brotherly, sisterly connection with as well. But I do, like, I'm in my head a lot with writing, and you know that because when we're texting and you're like opening up about what's going on with your book, and I'm just like, you're like, are you working on something? Yes.
Yeah, you don't share.
But I do appreciate those connections, and the ability to have people like you that I can, that I know that if I ever feel like I'm ready to share my writing, you're totally available and open and willing to read.
Yeah, and it is about that, right? And since we're kind of talking about like the world seems like the world doesn't seem, the world is on fire, right? And I think that what you said, it's like I think when we find our connections, we find our places where we feel at home. I think that's more important than ever, especially because we are in many cases forced to be apart physically, from other people, for the most part. And I think that just that idea of having some people that you can connect with, that you feel good around and comfortable with, I think that's an important conversation.
And also because in the world of writing in general, even though it is changing and has been changing over the past few years, there still are not a lot of people who share the same background or the same experiences that we may have had growing up. Like I said, because of our specific, Miami, or being Cuban American, or being Latino. So it's good to find people that you feel like you can, open, that like they understand where you're coming from and
So
how
for,
you
for
feel in this world.
so for those that don't know, like tell me about that background. Like why, like what's that, because you've really connected with so many kids all over the country. And for those people who are tuned in who don't know the kind of impact that your books have had, they're so personal, and yet they have such a universality to them. And I want you to, if you could, just chat a little bit about that, like from your own background to then like the kind of books that you do write, because I do want people to know exactly who you are and the kind of books that you do, so that they can go out and buy them, because they're important.
Yeah, so I'm Cuban Mexican, and I grew up in Miami, and that was an interesting experience, because when I was growing up in Miami in like the 80s, there weren't a lot of Mexican people in, really anywhere in my neighborhood. I grew up in a neighborhood of immigrants. It's called Alapata, and it was primarily immigrants from Central America, from the Caribbean. And so while I grew up surrounded by my Cuban culture, I really had no exposure to my Mexican culture. My mom came to this country when she was pretty young, and she, she was in this country alone. She didn't have family, and I think that she had, a really hard life in Mexico, and so because of that, she really separated herself from, I think, from that side of her, and so it wasn't until I left for college for the University of Florida that I really started to explore, what it meant to be Mexican American, and what that meant, not alone, but also as a bicultural person, somebody who was coming from two different backgrounds. And I always talk about this when I do school visits, that people assume that if you're from a Latin American country, that, they're all the same, that your culture is the same. Everyone eats tacos, or everyone, listens to mariachi. And so I explained to them, Cuban culture and Mexican culture are very different. And so when I write, a lot of times it comes from that place of feeling like I am always in between worlds, because of those differences in cultures, but also because I'm an American-born child of immigrants. And so there's also that kind of navigating of worlds there. So a lot of what I write is about characters who maybe aren't having those exact experiences, like cultural experiences, but are also feeling like they're kind of searching for their sense of identity, and trying to figure out how these very different parts of themselves fit together, and what their place is within their culture, within their cultural background, but also as an American, which are questions that I grew up kind of always struggling with. And I feel like as an adult, I still sometimes struggle with. And I think about like identity, not just in terms of culture, but, everyone at some point has some sort of identity questions, like, who am I? What is my place in the world? What is my place in my community? How do I find a place when I kind of exist in these very different separate worlds? And so that is often where, a lot of the story of the first rule of punk is about. And also Strange Birds, it's something that I'm always kind of grappling with, and I try to explore that through some of my characters.
And Strange Birds, by the way, if you look at John's page, you'll see that's the copy of your most recent book, Strange Birds, a field guide for ruffling feathers, which is probably I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little jealous of that title. That title is so kick-ass. And the book is awesome. And so talk a little bit about Strange Birds, because that's your most recent.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is that it's a story that is it's about these four girls, and they're all from different backgrounds, right? But that's not what the definition of the story is, right? It's really ultimately a story about friendship, right?
Yeah.
And so I want you to, if you could just talk a little bit about that book, because I think that for young readers, and for, like Deb said, for grandmas who are looking for books for their nietos or their, you know, grandchildren, or for really anybody, I think that it's an important book also to kind of talk about and to purchase to look it up.
Yeah, so Strange Birds is set in South Florida, where I grew up, and that was kind of the first thing that I started with, is knowing that I wanted to write a book that was set in the place that I grew up. And so it's set in a fictional town called Sable Palms, but it's based on my neighborhood growing up, Alapata. And for those of you who are in Miami, or familiar with Miami, it's right near the old Orange Bowl that's now the Marlins Stadium. So it's partially based on that neighborhood and also the area of Coconut Grove. And it's a story about these 4 kids that at the beginning of the summer don't know each other. Each chapter is told from the point of view of one of the 4 girls. And they come together because of a mysterious invitation. And through the course of the summer, they have to figure out how to set aside their differences and kind of overlook the things the differences that they don't share, the things that they don't share, in order to challenge this local tradition that they feel is outdated, which we are kind of seeing a lot of these days. Outdated traditions, a lot of that going on. And it was a really fun story to write, because it's about a lot of things. It's about activism. It's about learning to be an ally and to be a friend to someone who you may not necessarily feel like you have a lot in common with. It's about history. It's about, there's a little bit of mystery in there. And it's, at its heart, it really is about friendship too. I started the book, there's a quote from Stephen King's The Body, which was the novella that inspired Stand By Me. I should read it to you. Let me read you the quote.
Yes.
So the quote is, "I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12, which I love, because at the heart of like all of the story, the adventures, the trouble, the challenges, it boils down to these 4 girls learning to be friends. And it was a really fun book to write. And I feel like, I think it's pretty timely. You know, they're kids that are learning how to be activists. And that's another thing that I try to write and weave into my stories, is showing kids ways to express themselves and to voice their opinions, and to not feel powerless. Because I know that, like, as a kid, I felt, really powerless a lot of times, as a girl, as a child of immigrants. There are a lot of ways that a person can feel like they don't have power. And so I try to weave ways to empower kids in my stories.
So you've got your work as a writer, and then you've got your work as a librarian. And I remember you had told me you were, a couple of weeks ago, you had created a book donation, a book drive.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I want you to talk about that, because librarians are, to me, like the rock stars of the world, because what they bring is a knowledge, but also a sense of community, right? To me, a library is the heartbeat of a community. A library and a bookstore and an independent bookstore are the 2 heartbeats of communities, right? Because all our knowledge is in there, all our stories are in there, right?
Oh.
And I want, can you tell us about that book drive? Because I thought it was amazing. And I was actually on the phone with you when you were outside. It was raining. It was raining. So tell us a little bit about that. And that's so that people understand, this is what librarians, this is what is done. It was pretty dope, I have to say.
So, well, thanks. Yeah, it was fun to do, and it was inspired by something I saw someone else doing. But so I am a librarian. I am a community college librarian. So Chicago has a 7-college system, and I work at one of the campuses. And like you, libraries for me were, I always thought of as like my home away from home. And all of my life, I feel like when I've had questions, and I don't mean just like research questions for a paper, but like questions about life, just trying to figure out, what the heck I'm doing and, where I'm going. I would always go to the library and look for the answers. And so, so I think libraries are such an important place. And I should say an important physical place as well, because now with with the pandemic and the closing of everything, libraries are one of those places that have closed. And I know from my own experience at work, like the rush has been to, transfer everything to online. And there are a lot of people, we forget that there are a lot of people out there who, don't have access to technology or don't have the skills to use technology that that you would need to just like suddenly, move everything online and do everything online. So I think that the library as a space is a very important thing. And I hope that it's something that people remember, when we start to open up places again, that people need that space. It's a place for people to gather. It's a place for people who don't have access to technology to actually, access physical books. It's a place for people to ask for help. Nowadays, I was at the post office once, and there was somebody who was trying to fill out or trying to turn in a passport application, and they told her it had to be done online. And this was an older woman. She was not a native English speaker, and they're telling her, "I'm sorry, you gotta get this done online." And where people who need that kind of help go, the library, like the physical library. So so libraries are just such an important place. And I feel like it's always, from personal experience, I feel like it's one of the first places that gets chopped. It's like librarians, when they're cutting positions in schools, are that's one of the first positions that goes, and it's a travesty. So what I did with the book drive was, because schools had been closed, so children didn't have access to their school libraries, which I think is where a lot of public school kids really access libraries primarily, is through their schools. And because the public library was closed, I just decided to kind of put out a call for donations and see if people would, I wanted to collect a certain amount of money in order to buy a certain number of books to just give away during meal distribution at one of the local schools. And it's really cool, like, that people just are like, yeah, here's $10, here's $50, here's $100, like, here's some books, like, I'm a publisher, or I'm an author, I'm going to send you some books. And so I collected books. I tried to collect from the school covers K through 8, so I tried to collect kind of a decent amount for each grade level, and then just set up a table outside the school, and whenever people came to collect lunches, I would say, take a book. It's funny because some of the kids would be like, no, I don't, and then the parents would be like, yes, they want a book. So
I remember being on the phone with you, and there was a gentleman y te estaba hablando en español.
Uh-huh.
Y empezó a hablarte en español. He said, no, pero son gratis. And they were asking, like, oh, are these for free? Can we have these? Can I? And and then it was really cool. Just like the conversation was in Spanish. It was this gentleman. And then he was saying that he was giving like the ages of his kids, and Celia was giving them books based on their ages. And then also saying, well, does the kid like graphic novels? Does the kid like this and like that? And this is just a random stranger, and she's just doing a book drive, and she's like giving him, some in Spanish, right, recommendations for his kids. And I just think that was really, really, really cool. That was super, super cool.
Yeah, it was fun to be able to do. And as a cataloger, I had them all organized by grade, so it was very easy to just dig in.
So before we open it up to questions, I want to, do you have a list? Like, let's say there's people that are interested in saying, okay, well, I want to buy books, for my, for my kids, for my grandkids. I think that these are, as a librarian, as a writer, do you have a place where people can go to look and say, yeah, these are good, this is a good list, this is a good resource? Or can they find you on Twitter or Instagram and be like,
yeah, I can definitely, like, I don't know, maybe because sometimes the exact names of the websites kind of, so I can either put it in the chat screen, or if there's going to be something later on, we can maybe create a list of locations. But there are, so Bank Street Books does, like, I'm always, I would always direct people to like the lists that libraries create and schools of education create, because I think that they put a lot of thought into what they're putting together. And I think now they're definitely looking at creating more diverse lists. So I know the Center for Multicultural Children's Literature creates a list, and I'll have to like write those down too and make sure that I have the names correct. Brown Bookshelf is a great resource, and right now they have a lot of links to not just like book lists, but also to resources that educators can use, like the Zinn Project that looks at history through the lens of people who have been oppressed. Let's see, We Need Diverse Books usually has some pretty good lists. Can you think of any? You got to think.
I mean, I think like honestly, our even our own imprint, right, for our publishers is great. I mean, Kokila, it's an imprint of Penguin Young Readers. Kokila has an incredible list, and really, I think going to following authors, because we support each other, especially in the like children's young adult world. We support each other quite a bit, and it's, if you like I say, serious, I mean it, like if you follow Celia on Instagram, like she's posting all the time about books, like of people that have written stuff, and I've done that a lot too. I also post a lot about my kids.
It's a nice
but yeah, but yeah, so I mean, I think, John, if we could have some questions started popping in.
Absolutely. No, we have a whole lineup. Yeah.
Great. So let's give, because I want to give some time to answer whatever questions are out there, the next 15 minutes or so.
Sure. So one of the questions was, how do you research what's age appropriate when you're writing for a specific young adult age group, especially when these targets are moving?
That's a good question. Wow. I don't know. I mean, I read a lot of middle grade. I will admit that I primarily read middle grade, which is the kind of age group that we both write for, which the publishers always, I think on the book, they always label it as like 9 to 12. But my feeling is, depending on the reader, it can go younger, it can go older.
Yeah, because it says it usually on the covers is 10 and up, but it's really, but it's 10. It says, I'm looking at my book here. Hold on.
I'm seeing if I see it on the, so this one says 8 to 12 on the cover there.
Oh, yours says 8 to 12. I don't know what mine says.
I have a kid, so
you're a librarian, so I'll trust your.
I use my own personal experience as well. I mean, I have a. When the first Rule of Punk came out, my son was in the 6th grade. He's now in the 8th grade, but we're going into high school. So, I mean, as a parent, I think I'm pretty aware of what is appropriate. But that's an interesting question too, because a lot of times we think about. I think we underestimate what kids should know, what they're aware of. We don't give kids enough credit sometimes for the things that they know and that they're ready to know and ask questions about. And so I think, I don't know, Pablo, I mean, I think that's something that I kind of think about too when I'm writing, like being an activist, what does that mean? It might, to some people, it might seem like it's, that's that you didn't get in trouble if you're, out there stirring up things. Kids need to know, like they need to know history. That's why we are in the place that we're in now, because for so long we have, under the guise of protecting our kids, we don't talk about things. Mental health, like you were talking about last week, is one of those things that we.
Yeah, it's something that keeps coming up in these conversations. Is like, what are we? Because we write for young people, that somehow there's some level of protectiveness that we're supposed to come with our writing to, and I think that, like what you're saying, that's not what we do, and that's not what we should do. Or if you're a writer and you're attempting to write for young people, you should absolutely not write with this idea that I have to protect kids from whatever story they need to experience, right? And it's about this character, and the character, because what happens with a kid who's reading that book, right, they're experiencing their reality, right, regardless of what you're trying to protect them from. They're experiencing it, right? So if you think like, oh, I'm not going to write a book about what's going on outside in the world because I want to shelter them, right? Well, guess what? They're walking outside and they're experiencing that. You don't want to write a book about pain, but guess what? They're experiencing pain every day, about sadness, kids, and so if we try to write from the point of protection, right, we're actually doing more harm than good, right? Because we have to give them a place where they can feel seen, where they can feel heard, right? Where they can feel like, oh, this is an experience that I'm feeling, and I can spend time with it, with these words, with this character. This character has my experience, and I can get it. I feel it, right? And I think that's something that keeps coming up in conversations. And I teach this when I teach at an MFA program, and I teach writing, usually master's level writing. And a lot of writers, they come to me and the first question is like, well, no, because I feel like I want to protect these kids. I feel like I want to protect them. I'm like, no, you got to strip yourself from that. That is definitely not where you want to be. You got to be real with them, because that's what they're experiencing. They're experiencing real things.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? That's from somebody else who said, who asked, ask about encouraging and inspiring kids of this age to become both creative as writers and new readers. Are there any things that you found are particularly effective? I also have a couple of people asking about the list. By the way, in case you have any free time. But anyway.
I mean, we can, John, if you want, just for the list stuff, I mean, to give Celia and I some time so we can just type it up, and then we can send it out. We can send it out later, or just,
sure. Sure, maybe.
I'll type some into the chat box. I don't know if the chat box is something everyone has access to.
Everyone
I'll type a few in here while Pablo's answering that question.
Oh, that was okay. Perfect.
Okay, so what
it's about inspiring, as opposed to protecting. It was inspiring kids to write about, especially now, and to read, become new readers.
Here's the thing, John, and I appreciate the question. And here's the answer to that. You got to be real with kids, right? You got to be real with kids. You can't go in it to inspire a kid. You can't go in it to try and protect a kid. You just be real with them. Like, Celia has a teenager. I have a teenager, right? And if you try to fluff up their stories, or you try to sugarcoat stuff, they can see right through it. So you got to keep it real with them. You got to say, like, look, this is what's up. This is what's going on. Now there is a level of, of teaching that is involved in raising a child, as those of us who have children, there's so we have to give them some tools, right? But rather than I don't ever go and speak in front of young people and say and try to inspire them to do anything. I'm going in there to tell them, this is my experience. This is how I come to my work. And these are tools. If you want them, use them, go with these tools and build your own castles from them. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how I approach it, because especially, and I love this age group because you cannot BS them. They're so real and they're so true. And I love that about them. I really respect young people. And I think coming at it from just being honest and truthful, rather than from this perspective of I'm trying to teach you, I'm trying to inspire you, I'm trying to do that. I think that that there's a better resonance with just being real with them than there is like trying to like stand on this like this post and like talk to them. You know what I'm saying?
Got it?
Celia, what do you think?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
It was a question about encouraging kids to write creatively, especially during this period, but also to become inspiring them to become new readers.
Yeah, so so as far as encouraging kids to write creatively, probably you were going to ask me about zines. I should.
I was finishing with that. Yeah.
So I'll talk about zines now. So this is actually a great time for kids to be creating zines. What
are zines? What are zines, Celia?
So a zine, the most basic definition of a zine, and that's Z-I-N-E, like a magazine, is it's basically a handmade publication. It's a homemade publication. Its history goes, it goes pretty far back. People usually look at kind of two branches, one being like the punk movement in the 70s, and the other being like science fiction in the 1930s. So, but either way, whatever history you look at, it's basically people who didn't otherwise see themselves represented in kind of more mainstream publications, creating their own publications for other people who were into those things. And I got into zines when I got into punk music because there's sort of like two things that kind of go like are part of the same subculture, if you want to call it that. And the thing I loved about zines is that it gave me the freedom to just write about anything and to express myself and to not ask somebody for permission about what I could create or how I could create it. And so for the first rule of punk, the first book that I published, this character writes zines, and in the book the zines are a way to kind of look into her thoughts. So there are things that are sort of mentioned in the story that the zines go into more detail on. And I always encourage kids to write zines, and I've done zine workshops at schools and at libraries because they're easy to make. You don't need a computer, you don't need any fancy software, you don't need any fancy materials. If you have paper, you have something to write with, you basically are making your own publication. And so now is a great time to make a zine because so my friend Jenna Friedman, who is the zine librarian at Barnard, I think I'm probably misquoting her, but she said something along the lines of, who better to document this period in history than all of us? And that's basically what zines do. They're documenting the lives of people and their genres of zines. So it can be a personal zine where you just write about your life and what's happening. But you can do poetry zines, you can do recipe zines, comic zines, whatever you can think of. The sky's the limit. So as far as encouraging kids to be creative, that's a possibility. That's something that I like to talk about when I go to schools. And as far as reading, I really the only thing I can really say is let your kids read whatever they want to read. Don't put restrictions on a lot of times we get down on graphic novels because they're comic books and they're not real books. And that is the kind of thing that turns kids off because, if that's what draws them as far as reading, it's a book. So let them read graphic novels. I think, we need to encourage reading in any format that it can happen and not think of it as just like what we have grown up traditionally thinking of as reading. So, I guess be creative in the way you as an adult think about about reading and about writing.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? It's just to get them interested in reading and being creative, right?
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time. We're just about out, but there was a question from very early on when you mentioned outdated traditions, Celia,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of mentioned them and passed along. What were you thinking of specifically?
So, so in the book Strange Birds, the outdated tradition is that there is a local scout troop who, or a scout type troop who has this hat that is like their traditional object that the girl who is crowned Miss Flora gets to wear. And the hat has a history, and the history of the hat goes back to when hunting birds for their feathers was was like all the rage in fashion. So to the point where a lot of a number of bird species were near extinction. And it's activism at that time that led to legislation that became the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So when I'm talking about outdated traditions, I'm talking about, putting up statues to honor people that maybe, not everyone feels or not everyone knows from experience should be honored. Things like just recently, speaking of my alma mater, University of Florida, they recently got rid of, oh my gosh, I want to say it's a gator bait song. So that was kind of a tradition for the past 20 years where they would have some kind of chant. And if you look at the history of gator baiting in Florida, it has a very racist history. And so that was a tradition that they did away with. And you can see that, you can see it in all, I think in all parts of our society. There's, using Native Americans as mascots. That's a tradition that has been challenged recently and has been challenged for a long time. We just, are now recently starting to really, talk about it and listen and hopefully do something about it. But I think I love traditions in some ways, and I feel like my favorite thing to do is turn a tradition upside down, turn it on its head. And so that's another thing I try to do in my writing. And hopefully when we challenge these traditions, we're able to kind of turn them upside down on their heads and make something good.
Mm-hmm.
You can find some Zen in that, can't
you? Very good, very good. Well, I think this is an amazing conversation that covered so much ground and was fascinating. And we're kind of out of time right now, so I want to allow everybody to unmute themselves to clap for you and thank you, and then we'll come back and Deborah will talk about the next thing. And yes, go ahead. You have something to say.
I just wanted to say I did plug in a number of the resources
that
we mentioned in the chat box. So if anyone wants to hop on there and take a look at those.
Okay. So
you have to find your own link though.
You can find, yeah, you didn't put the links, but that's okay. That's better like this. So everybody can unmute yourselves who wants to say thank you, and I'll clap. Thank you very much.